In April 1945, as World War II collapsed into its final violent breaths, Europe was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard in the making. Entire cities had vanished under firestorms. Families slept in cellars that shook like coffins. Orders were no longer about victory, they were about revenge, pride, and denial. And somewhere in the Austrian Alps, one small town stood on the edge of annihilation. Bombers were ready, artillery was aimed, the command was already written: destroy the city. But one man, unarmed, uncelebrated, and almost forgotten by history, decided to step directly into death to stop it. His name was Josef Zepp Gengel, and his story proves that sometimes the bravest act in war is refusing to fight. By the spring of 1945, Nazi Germany was finished, not defeated with dignity, but collapsing in panic. The front lines were breaking apart faster than orders could reach them. Units were retreating without maps. Commanders issued impossible demands from safe distances, and civilians paid the price. Villages were ordered to fight to the last man. Homes were converted into artillery positions. Children were told to dig trenches. In the Austrian town of Wurgel, the situation was dire. The Nazi command had issued a final instruction: defend the town at all costs, which in reality meant something far darker. It meant placing heavy weapons near civilian houses. It meant using civilians as shields. It meant turning Wurgel into a target that would be erased from the map. Josef Gengel was a German Wehrmacht officer stationed nearby. By rank, he was expected to obey, but by conscience, he could no longer pretend. Gengel had fought long enough to understand the truth. The war was lost, the sacrifices were meaningless, and the orders being given now were no longer military, they were suicidal. He had seen cities reduced to rubble. He had seen civilians executed for being in the way. He had seen young soldiers die defending nothing. And somewhere between the smoke and the screaming, Gengel reached a breaking point. He made a decision that would mark him as a traitor to his own side. He chose the people over the orders. Instead of preparing defenses, Gengel began doing something incredibly dangerous. He refused to obey. Gengel quietly withdrew his remaining men from front-line positions, not to desert, but to protect. He positioned his soldiers not to fight the approaching Allied forces, but to shield the civilians of Wurgel from Nazi retaliation. At night, his unit dismantled weapons placed near homes. They warned townspeople before SS patrols arrived. They acted as guardians against their own army. This was not rebellion in the open, this was resistance in silence. And if discovered, the punishment would be immediate execution. But Gengel knew something worse than death awaited the town if he did nothing. Then Gengel did something almost unheard of. He crossed enemy lines. Under the cover of chaos, he made contact with advancing American forces. He told them the truth. "There are civilians here," he said. "If you attack, they will die." He didn't ask for mercy for himself, he asked for restraint for the town. The Americans were skeptical. German officers were not supposed to surrender early, and certainly not cooperate. But Gengel's sincerity was undeniable. And then he brought up something that changed everything. Just outside Wurgel stood Castle Itter, not a fortress, a prison. Inside were some of the most important prisoners in Europe: former French prime ministers, generals, resistance leaders, high-value hostages, and the SS had a plan. As the Reich collapsed, the prisoners were to be executed, so no one would live to tell the story. Gengel knew the SS were closing in. If the castle fell, the prisoners would be slaughtered. So he made an impossible request. He asked the Americans to help him defend it. What happened next sounds like fiction. American soldiers, German soldiers, fighting together. Not against civilians, not against prisoners, but against the SS. In one of the strangest battles of World War II, former enemies stood shoulder to shoulder. They fortified Castle Itter. They prepared for an attack they knew was coming. And Josef Gangl stood among them, a German officer protecting Allied prisoners from German soldiers. History rarely prepares us for moments like this. The SS attack came hard and fast. Gunfire echoed through the hills, bullets tore into stone walls, smoke filled the castle courtyard. Inside, the prisoners, men who once commanded nations, were now targets. During the chaos, Gangl saw something that froze him in place. One of the prisoners had been caught in the open, exposed, defenseless. A sniper was lining up a shot. Gangl didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He stepped forward. A single shot rang out. The bullet struck him in the head. Gangl collapsed instantly. The prisoner lived. Minutes later, American reinforcements arrived. The SS retreated. Castle Itter was saved. The prisoners survived. And the town of Wurgl was spared from destruction. But the man who made it possible never saw the victory. Josef Gangl died on May 5, 1945, 3 days before the war officially ended. There were no medals waiting for him, no ceremonies, no immediate recognition. He was buried quietly. In the chaos of post-war Europe, his story nearly vanished. But the people of Wurgl never forgot. They remembered the officer who dismantled weapons instead of firing them, the man who warned civilians instead of arresting them, the soldier who gave his life not for a flag, but for human beings. Today, a street in Wurgl bears his name, not as a conqueror, but as a protector. History loves victory. It celebrates those who conquer, destroy, and dominate. But Josef Gangl reminds us of a different kind of courage. The courage to say no. The courage to disobey evil. The courage to protect life when killing is easier. He didn't fire a single shot to save a city. He simply chose humanity. And sometimes, that is the most powerful weapon.